Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 12 of the Memorial Memo KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Friends of Cole. Katie, there is a lot on the table today, per usual. You got some rankings, you got some wins, just a lot of excitement around the program. But before we dive into any of it, just how are you?
I'm doing good, but more importantly, how are you doing? It was your first day of class today.
I did okay. Actually, Mondays aren't too bad. Yeah, we're recording here on a Monday, but wasn't too bad actually. I had one class. John Hale, Lexington Herald Leader football writer, is my professor in that class. That threw me for a loop. So shout out to John. But other than that, it went pretty smoothly, I'd say. How about you?
I don't have classes on Mondays, so
Oh,
actually I'm not doing anything till tomorrow. But
solid. There we go. All right. So Katie, like I said, a lot to dive into, but I think the big thing from today, anyway, Kentucky, they're finally getting some respect. They're finally being, it's not just us here on the internet blabbing about Kentucky. Kentucky's up to number 12 in the AP poll, their highest ranking since January 24th of 2021, when they're also number 12. Katie, I mean, it felt like preseason, it felt like Kentucky, to me at least, was like maybe like the sixth or seventh best team in the SEC and like a borderline top 25 team in the country. But it just seems all of a sudden like Kentucky, they may be one of the best teams in the country. Not just, you know, not just a team that's maybe not. No, like they may be actually like really really good, Katie.
yeah, and it's good to see them move up in the poll. It feels a little bit weird in a way that Oklahoma moved down as much as they did and North Carolina. I mean, Oklahoma lost to Texas, but Texas also moved down in the polls, and so I think it kind of gives like a grand picture of where the SEC is at in terms of who the good teams are and who aren't really the good teams. But it's good to see Kentucky move up, especially since this is their highest ranking in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and you come to think of it, and I think of Kentucky and Oklahoma because we're 12 and Oklahoma is 13. If Kentucky and Oklahoma played on a neutral court, I would probably assume Oklahoma wins that game. But I think
Hmm.
right now the main thing that's killing Oklahoma is that they lost to Mississippi State, who we beat
Mm.
by 20. So I think that's the main justification for them. But it's not only the AP poll, Katie. There's also the net rankings now as well. Kentucky, they were hovering around that 30 mark in the net rankings, and now all of a sudden they're up to number 17. So
Hmm.
if the NCAA tournament started today, they would be the first five seed in the NCAA tournament. Now, of course, we're going to talk about it in a minute, but there's a very big reason why you want to be a top four seed in the NCAA tournament. But Katie, I mean, 17 is the highest Kentucky's been in the net all year. They're moving up there too, and again in the rankings that probably matter the most of any of these we're about to talk about.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the NCAA's website, I mean, there are so many SEC teams in the top 20. I'm It looks like there's like eight or nine, which is so crazy. Like I said earlier, it just shows how good the SEC is. So it feels good to be up there with the rest of them and know that this year Kentucky can actually compete.
And that's just crazy to me because I just feel like I'm living in like a dream where it's just like, Kentucky, they're good, but they're also like really good, and they're in the conversation of like the top 10 teams in the country, which is
Hmm.
just pretty amazing to say out loud. Kentucky, according to ESPN and their latest bracketology, Kentucky is a projected 3 seed. Now, like you see right there on our screen, to be the first time Kentucky be a 3 seed since 2016. It's been a while since Kentucky's been that good, or been that high in the NCAA tournament. I will say the good thing about being a 3 seed, and this is what I was alluding to just a second ago. All the top four, so the top 16 seeds, like the top, I guess if you're a 1 through a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, you host the first 2 rounds.
Hmm.
That's so. In this case, Kentucky would have their first and second round games in Lexington, which Katie, that's huge. Trying to
Hmm.
get to a Sweet 16 or a potential even further down the road in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and I mean, Kenny and a lot of the players on the team have talked about wanting to get people to come watch. I mean, that's the perfect way to do it. If you even have like a hunch that Kentucky could be a 4-3-2, even a 1 seed if God willing. But if you are a fan and you see that, you kind of don't want to be the fan to hop on the bandwagon, right? You just want to be the one that was there supporting from the beginning. I think now is the perfect time for a fan to actually be a fan and come to the games rather than wait until tournament time. So I think that not only is this motivation for the team, but also for the fans.
Right. And you see, if you again, if you're listening on podcast, you obviously don't see the graphic, but if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the graphic. It's interesting to me. Half of Kentucky's games, Katie, have been quad four games. Didn't quite realize it was that bad. But let me say, you look at this resume. You're 1-1 in quad one, 4-0 in quad two, and then you're combined 10-0 in quads three and four. So I mean, you literally almost could not have a better resume. Like if there's any, I mean, losing your only loss on the season came to, I think they're number 14 now in the AP poll at North Carolina. And yeah, it was a 19-point loss, but that's still your only loss. Like I feel like Katie, I just feel like for as much as there is like criticism like Kentucky's non-conference or their early conference slate is soft, you know, no, it's of course they're going to be 15-1. They're not playing anybody. I
Mhm,
feel like with the teams you have played, you're handling business, and you
mhm.
couldn't ask for a much better start to the year.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially because we saw with like the Louisville win. Louisville was projected to be one of the best teams in the nation. They kind of fell off a little bit, but then they beat Georgia Tech yesterday. And so
Yeah.
it's like a little bit more impressive that you came out with the win over Louisville, even though they had a couple of rough games in between there. But I mean, Louisville's a good team, so even though that's a quad two win, it's still a good win. And like you said, I mean, it's a great resume going into the rest of the season, and I think that Kentucky's doing a great job handling business like they have to.
And I will say, like you think, because you look at Kentucky, some of Kentucky's wins, and I think about that Illinois win on a neutral court. You beat them by 20. I just want to remember, like, I want people to remember that was that was a healthy Illinois team. I think it was announced yesterday, like Makira Cook and I can't even remember who the other one was, but two of their best players now are out for the year, and like Illinois just lost the other night, like so they're gonna fall apart and not have a great year probably, but I hope whenever the committee kind of looks at those wins and they see that Illinois win, I hope they take that into account a little bit. I didn't quite
Hmm.
realize, okay, that Florida win. I thought Florida might be a quad three game, but I guess because it's on the road, and it helps that Florida's an SEC team. It was actually a quad two win, so it's actually a
Hmm.
pretty good win for Kentucky on the road too, beating the Gators fairly handily.
Yeah.
And then just kind of going in a little bit more about Florida, Kentucky. You know, they beat the Gators pretty, like I said, pretty handily. You kind of do what you need to do. Beat them 71-55 in Gainesville. I wasn't in town for that game, which, by the way, before we even talk about the game, I just want to talk about just the kind of experience, right? So, I guess for context, if you've never been down there, the football stadium and the basketball arena are right next to each other. And long story short, I had to go in a little office inside of the football stadium briefly to ask something, to figure something out. I go back to the arena, right? And I asked someone because I was supposed to get like a game day email from Florida. It's like, here, buddy, here's your information you need. Didn't get that. So I just kind of walk up to the arena and see the first worker I see, and I'm like, hey, where do I go to check in at? And they just look at me and they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, what do you mean? This is what we do. We check into these games, get our little passes, and go on our merry way. And so she leaves me and asks somebody and comes back and she's like, just go in this door, like this obscure door over here. So I do. I ask those people, hey, where do I go to check in? They don't know. They go, let's take you down here to the blue room, which I think that's the press conference room. They didn't know where that was. They told me the room to go to. They didn't know where it was, and because I was like, can you all guide me down there? And they're like, yeah, sure. And then they're like, well, we don't know where it's at actually. We just know the general vicinity that it's at in the arena. So I had to like find my own way around. I don't think I actually got a media credential or anything. I think I was just kind of there with like a wristband on my wrist to tell me that I was there. But Katie, the experience down there was great. I had people ask how it was. Almost got stranded in Atlanta on the way back, but that's a whole different story. But going down to Gainesville is not for the faint of heart. Apparently, it snowed down there the morning I went to the game too. I guess it all melted away before, but just kind of talking about the game now, Katie. Like, it just feels like Kentucky. They play so well when they need to play well, like against these like better teams. And then I don't know about you, but I just feel like when they, I don't want to say they play down to competition, but I just, Katie. Sometimes I just wish they beat Florida by 40 and we just move on. But I guess a 16-point win, not 16. How many points is that? Is it 16? 16-point win?
Yeah.
I think that should suffice. But what do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, like you said, it's on the road and um it I guess classifies as a quad 2 win even though Florida isn't that great. But what I will say is watching the broadcast, it was almost jarring when the camera zooms out and you see that there's nobody in the
Oh my
stands.
gosh, yeah.
It was empty. And it's sad because I mean, this was kind of the situation last season, but it's almost like, okay, well, wasn't it even really an away game? Because there were quite a few Kentucky fans there. So really, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it was more like one of those neutral court games, but I mean, I
It
guess like you
honestly, it
said, the
honestly
ticket.
kind of was like a neutral site game. I mean, I was there, and and I don't have to speak through a filter like some of the coaches do. There were probably like 500 people, if that, in the whole arena, and honest to God, 250 of them are probably UK fans. Like half of the people there were UK fans, which I think that's actually pretty cool to say. Like you had that many people at an away game, but Florida fans, I mean, I guess we can see why because their team isn't great. But my
Hmm.
goodness, it's I guess it's hard to get excited for Florida Gators women's basketball. That place. That's what's so good about Kentucky is that, and again, like Kentucky could fill up Rep Arena for certain games. I know they could, but
Hmm.
it's good that Kentucky has like a smaller arena because it's more fit for women's basketball. But I guess for Florida they need like I don't even know like out here in the street like basketball rims with broken nets and rusted rims because
Hmm.
apparently they can't put more than 500 butts in the seats. But Katie, I want to dive into the stats a little bit, talk about who played well, who maybe didn't play as great. You had Georgia Amore, who wasn't her best shooting night. 1 of 6 from three is kind of the main eyesore when you look at the box score, but 18 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 steals. So she's kind of doing her thing there. Again, I just don't love how streaky she can be, but I guess you kind of
Hmm.
take the good with the bad, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this yesterday after the Auburn game, and it's weird to look at her stat sheet because she's not super efficient from the field, but she gets the points, so you'll take it. And then she's also usually there with the assists, and even though she only had four, but still, I mean, a good job from her. Like she fills up the stat sheet and everything, every single stat. So it's not just like she's shooting not good and then she's not doing anything else. So it's always good to see her do her thing. It's a little weird to look at the stats, but other than that, I mean, I think that she's doing a great job.
She did have 6 turnovers, which I don't want to say it concerns me because I mean, we kind of seen it all year where she'll turn the ball over but then make these great plays. I think it
Hmm.
was in the Auburn game. I think I tweeted out something along the lines of like, Georgia Amore in transition is either like perfect or catastrophic, and
Hmm.
there's just no in between, and you take what you get. But I guess when you have an All SEC point guard in your hands, you, again, like I said, you take the good with the bad. You had Deja
Yeah.
Lawrence, Katie, who played in my opinion, really well. 14 points, 5 of 10 from the field, 4 of 8 from three. Didn't do a whole lot outside of that. She did have 2 assists and 2 steals,
Hmm.
but she did have the highest plus minus on the team, plus 19, Katie. So I think that kind of tells you all you need to know. When she's on the court, Kentucky does better.
Yeah, I think she's really good balance for this team, and I think that she does a great job of being consistent. I feel like we say this every week. She is always pretty consistent, regardless of the way she starts the game. I feel like she ends the game the way that you want her to if you're her coach. But yeah, I mean, I think she did a great job too, but like you said, she didn't really do much else besides score, so there's not really much else to talk about with her.
And Claire Strack, Katie, I feel like I'm noticing more and more. She's just, I don't want to say trigger happy because I feel like that has a negative connotation to it, but she's a lot more willing to shoot the three now.
Hmm.
She's really testing her limits as far as her shooting goes because against Florida, she did go 0 of 4 from three, which is obviously not great. But she had 12 points on 5 of 13 shooting, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and then a block and a steal apiece. Wasn't her best game. I don't think anybody. Well, that's the thing about this Florida game.
Hmm.
Nobody had their best game. Like you
Yeah.
probably should have beat Florida. Like you got up on Florida by 20. I think maybe even like late in the first quarter, like that early, and you won by 16. But Florida made a little run there in the second half, but and then Kentucky won. It just wasn't their best game, and I feel like you could see that Clara Strack too.
Yeah, I like how confident Clara Strack is from the three, but I do just wish that it would start to go in because I feel like it's not consistent at all. And it'll be like maybe she'll make one during a game, but not even. She's probably averaging like point 0.5 3-pointers a game, just like not even one
Something like
three-pointer a
that, yeah.
game. Yeah. So I like that she has the confidence because it's gonna go in eventually, but it's just, I would honestly rather see her down low than on the perimeter. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm just like, I mean, you want to see what all
Hmm.
can Kentucky do, like
Yeah.
what mixing and matching can they really do, but I think sometimes you and again, I think it's good that she's shooting threes because
Hmm.
in the end, like hopefully she starts making them, and that's just like oh my gosh, like there's another thing she can do, um, but just, I don't know, Katie, like they're not going in right now, and I'm kind of like you. I almost want to see her just down on the block, but I feel like it's limiting kind of what she does. Katie, we're about to preview Auburn, but before we do that, want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Friends of Cole for sponsoring today's episode. Friends of Coal is dedicated to informing and educating Kentucky citizens about the coal industry and its vital role in the state's future. We provide a united voice for an industry that has been and remains a critical economic contributor to Kentucky. By working together, we can provide good jobs and benefits for future generations. Coal is resilient, reliable, and affordable. Friends of Coal is a volunteer organization. All are invited to be a part of our organization, which consists of proud Kentuckians as well as residents from beyond our borders. Head to friendsofcoalkentucky.org to learn more. But yeah, Katie, just go ahead getting into the whole Auburn game. Kentucky, they won that one pretty handily again, right? And I think the good thing about this Auburn game is that unlike Florida, for the most part, except for maybe a stretch in the third quarter, felt like a kind of a complete game. Kentucky beats the Tigers 80-61. Auburn, Katie, I know we talked about it, just kind of sitting there watching the game. I felt like poor Deanna Gaston. I feel like they yelled at her for every little thing she did. She's their best player, and I guess I get it because you don't want her getting in foul trouble. But my gosh, Katie, I just felt like, I mean, I don't know how good Auburn will be in SEC play. I don't even know if they'll be 500 in SEC play. But all I could think for most of that game is, my gosh, poor Deanna Gaston.
I know, I mean, she scored 23 points for them too, so it's not even like she did bad. I mean, granted, she had 4 fouls, but you really can't afford to take your best player out of the game when it comes to trying to beat Kentucky, especially because in the third quarter, they cut the lead to like 6 or something. So
Yeah, I think it was 45-39 at one point in the third quarter.
it almost looked like Auburn was going to come back, and it almost looked like it was going to be because of Deanna Gaston. I think that that's kind of the reason why they were being so critical with her because they really needed her in the game, which, I mean, granted, Kentucky obviously came out with a win, but when Auburn was going on that hot streak and Kentucky kind of went cold, it was like, okay, let's take advantage of it. And if you foul out, then we can't win. That's just, I mean, that's the vibes that I got.
Right, and Katie, again, I want to say, I think I did say it was a complete game, but there was one glaring stat which I think is important and worthy of note. Kentucky was out rebounded
Hmm.
38-32, and they were killed on the offensive glass 17-5. Now, Kenny Brooks on his radio show, he kind of attributed that to their bigs being in foul trouble. And I mean, that was the case. Claire Strack had 4 fouls, Amelia Hassett had 3, Tiani had 3. But I mean, I just can't help. But I mean, Kentucky had the size advantage, but it's unfortunate to see them maybe not dominate the way they should on the boards. But I don't know if that's something I should be worried about moving forward. Just what do you think about? Because again, you're going to get against these teams where every possession matters. Maybe it
Hmm.
wasn't quite the case against Auburn, but every possession is going to matter. And whenever you're giving them up on the glass, Katie, is that something you're concerned about moving forward at all?
I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily concerned, but I do think that this is one of those games where Auburn just happened to be the more physical team. I mean, we knew going into it that Auburn was pretty defensively solid. They're not a great team at all by any means, but they are pretty good on defense. And it doesn't shock me that Kentucky was unable to get offensive rebounds like you would like to see, but to be out rebounded defensively, it's just a little bit it's not concerning to me, but it is a little bit like I don't really know what to think of it because I mean, 17 offensive rebounds for Auburn is just it almost looks like lack of effort to me because how are you going to give up 17 offensive rebounds when you have the height advantage? You should be getting rebounds all over these people and you're not.
Because I think Kenny was trying to make the argument of like, well, they were all on the bench. Well, it's like, I mean, yes, you had players on the bench, but at the same time, not all 3 of them were on the bench at the same
Yeah.
time. So I don't know. It's a little bit puzzling to me, but I think I'd like to write it off as like a one game, like
Mhm.
whatever. But I just don't know if I love that as a sign moving forward. But again, it's kind of hard to complain when you're 15-1 and 4-0 in the SEC.
Yeah.
By the way, I guess we forgot to point this out. Kentucky's 4-0 in the SEC for the first time since the 2013 season. They went to the Elite Eight that year and won 30 games. So, maybe
Pretty
Kentucky,
good.
maybe they can do that again. Who knows? And there's also 3 undefeated teams in the SEC, Katie. LSU and South Carolina, as you'd expect, and then Kentucky. So just really good start to the year. But diving into the stats of this game a little bit as well, Katie. 21 points, 11 assists for Georgia Amore. Just a brilliant game from her. Again, I think we can just kind of expect her to shoot under 50%. Like, I mean, she's a
Mhm.
guard.
Yeah.
And especially with her increased shot volume now, I think that's just kind of going to happen. But anytime you can get a 21 point, 11 assist game from your leader, I think that's a pretty good sign for things, Katie.
Yeah, it was her first double-double since the season opener against USC Upstate, so it's been a while since we've seen her. She's been getting 9 assists pretty frequently, but she hadn't really crossed that 10 yet. And so it was good to see that. And also, she was perfect from the free throw line, 6 of 6. So that's always good to see because they're free throws for a reason. They're just free points. But yeah, like you said, she's probably going to shoot under 50%, but at least shots are going in. I think
Yeah.
that that's what I'm more happy about because she did have a little bit of like a weird slump, but finally I think she's out of that and she's really producing the way that she's supposed to.
Well, you have certain teams that just like, what do you do trying to
Yeah.
guard this Kentucky team? Like Georgia Amore, if you don't, like, you're an idiot if you don't guard Georgia Amore. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, she's going to score 30 or 40 or 50 if you don't guard her at all. But at the same time, can't put everything on her because
Yeah.
the best passer in the country and has some excellent teammates around her. So I don't know. I almost feel bad. Not again. I don't, right? I almost feel bad for opposing teams trying to game plan against her, but she comes out, she does what she needs to do against, in my opinion, just an inferior opponent. Deja Lawrence, Katie, and earlier you pointed this out, which I thought was really, really neat because it implies with this Auburn game too. Uh, she started off cold. She started off, I think, 0 for 4 or 0 for 5 from three,
Hmm.
and it just like felt like Kentucky just really needed her to kind of show up to put the nail in the coffin or to create that separation that we saw at the
Hmm.
end. And she did that. She would end up making her last several shots, 21 points, 8 of 13 shooting from the field, 4 of 9 from three. Uh, she didn't, again, there was a stretch of like 4 or 5 games, Katie, where she was getting like 5 assists a game. Just one assist in this game against Auburn. So I guess that's starting to dip back down a little bit. But again, 21 points from your other guard, can't be too mad at that either.
I think the assist numbers, I'm okay with them because, I mean, Georgia had 11, so it's not really, there's not that many assists to go around, I guess. I mean, people were just kind of
Yeah,
taking shots on their own, but um, I really admire what Deja Lawrence was able to do in the third quarter because, like we said earlier, there was a point where Auburn was starting to come back, and Kentucky desperately needed some kind of energy, something. And Deja was 0 for 4 heading into this point, and so she finally makes a three from one of the corners, and Auburn calls a timeout. And then immediately out of the timeout, she makes another three, and then she gets a steal, I think, and makes some kind of fast break layup, and that's 8 points in a row. And I'm looking at the box score right now. It says Kentucky's best scoring run was 8 points in the third quarter, and that was Deja. And I think that that truly was the difference in the game, and Kentucky able to, I mean, come out like to solidify the win, not just win the game, but to show like we've already won.
right. And it's you never want to say like someone single-handedly won you the game because this is
Yeah.
no, this is like basketball and it's like a team sport and it's so hard to have a game like if Deja came out and scored 40, maybe you can make that argument, but I do think I do think in saying that it is important to kind of note that she maybe wasn't the single reason Kentucky beat Auburn, but she's the biggest reason. She's the main reason Kentucky beat Auburn. She played just out of her mind. Claire Strack, talk about 0 of 4 from 3 in the last game. Well, she went 1 of 2 against Auburn, so up in that percentage just a little bit. Scored 16
Mhm.
points on 6 of 8 shooting. She had 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and 4 blocks. To go along with that, she had just another good game for her. Deanna Gaston and really that whole Auburn team is super physical, super imposing physically. Kenny Brooks talked about how Auburn is probably the most physical team Kentucky will see all season. And I mean, 16 points, 6 of 8 shooting, 5 rebounds. I mean, I think she handled it pretty well, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we've seen some bad games from her, we've seen some really good games from her, and I think this is like the consistent game from her. It's like the game that you want to see the most because she's filling up stats all across the box score, and her being aggressive on defense was really helpful. Of course, Kentucky was out rebounded, but I mean, Claire Strack had 4 blocks, so you'll take that, I think, over a few extra rebounds. But 6 of 8 from the field, it's very efficient for her because usually, I mean, like you said, she can be a little bit trigger happy in a way, for lack of a better term. But um, glad to see a three went in, and then she was 3-4 from the free throw line, so it's always good to see when a big is able to be consistent from the line as well.
For sure. And then you had Tony Key, who, again, kind of talking about like Clara Strack, like she's one of those players who you see and you're like, is she gonna have a big game today? Is she gonna do an okay game today? I wouldn't say she had a big game against
Mhm.
Auburn, but she definitely played well. 15 points, 7 of 9 shooting. She had 7 rebounds and 2 blocks. I think if you get that, you talk about consistency and how you're going to play, on a night to night basis. Katie, I think if you get 15 and 7 and then 2 blocks from Tiani Key on a nightly basis, I think you're going to win a lot of basketball games.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that Tiani Key, in a good way, has the most attitude on the team because you look at her and you see her face and it is like stone cold. She is not, she doesn't crack a smile. Like she is the most serious person on that court, at least to me, from an outward perspective. I think that she is very intimidating. I am intimidated by her. She's just very aggressive and she shot really well last night, and 7 rebounds is pretty good for her. I mean, she doesn't really do much more than double digits, so I like 15 and 7 from her.
Now that you say that, I'm kind of like second guessing and questioning everything I've ever thought of because now that you bring it up, I don't feel like I've ever seen Tiani Key smile, and I just want Tiani Key to know that we're all here. But no, yeah, you are right about how she's kind of I guess the emotion, maybe the emotional leader. I see a lot of that in Deja Lawrence too. Deja's definitely the
Mhm.
most vocal. Deja's definitely the vocal leader. I'll say that.
Mhm.
Deja's definitely the vocal leader, the loudest voice on the court. But Tiani Key definitely exudes a lot of emotion. Well, when she wants to get in somebody's face or she wants to referee know they made a bad call, she's very exudes a lot of her emotion. But I guess when are going well, Katie, other than like your typical like point to like the whoever gave you the dime, like not a lot from her. But I
Mhm.
guess you'll take what you get and can't. I'd rather her do 15-7 than be, you know, would you rather have, like, I don't know, like, would you rather have someone who's actually doing well, or would you rather have Grayson Allen, where you're known for flopping all the time? Like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you want to contribute. But Katie, Kentucky has a week-long break from last Sunday to this coming Sunday. Probably I think the longest break they'll have all season. I'm not sure they have another week-long break left. But Kentucky next Sunday takes on Georgia. The Bulldogs are 9-9 and 1-3 in the SEC, so they have been off to a rough start. I think, you know, I think it's worthy to note she isn't playing. She's still recovering from an injury, but Nia Leverett, who was at Kentucky last season, and I think a year or two before that. I know she's a senior, but with her injury, I'm not exactly sure how long she's actually been playing. But she's at Georgia now. Uh, Obviously, it's interesting. It's cool. Hope her injury, her recovery ends up going well. But Katie,
Mhm.
kind of similarly with Anaya at Mississippi State, it's neat to see, someone who used to cover every day and like look across the court and be like, oh, there's Nia Liberator.
Mhm. Yeah, it is cool. She was in one of my classes last year, so
Mm.
that was pretty cool to, see her on the daily. But yeah, I mean, I hope that her injury recovery, goes well and she can. I'm assuming she's probably not gonna play this season. Maybe I actually don't know if she's redshirted, but um, I hope that she gets to see the court eventually.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you just because her injury was so. I mean, her ACL tear was a gruesome ACL tear, and
Hmm.
it happened late in that season, late in the 2022-23 season. So obviously, it could be a long road recovery, and not everybody recovers the same too. It may take her longer.
Yeah.
But talking about Georgia, just in general, Katie, you want to talk about teams that aren't good. This next episode of our podcast we're gonna do. If Kentucky loses to Georgia, Katie, I'm gonna be a sad man. All right, they lost to Hampton for crying out loud at home, I believe. Let me check to be sure because that could be a neutral site game. Okay, yeah, it was at home. Okay, I wanted to be sure. Yeah, they lost to Hampton at home, Katie. Hampton. I mean, what in the world? Hampton, Katie. But you just kind of dive into their team a little bit. They are 9-9, but they do have some players worthy to note, like Trinity Turner, averaging 12.9 points and 4.7 rebounds per game. She brings, I think it's fair to say she's one of, if not their best players, alongside Damari Flournoy, excuse me. 12.3 points, 2.2 assists, 2.1 rebounds from her. She shoots 40% from three, though, shooting 95% from the line. Katie, if her field goal percentage was up, she's only shooting 39% on the year. She would be on track for 50, 40, 90 a year, but of course, her shooting isn't all the way there. Just in general. And then you have Mia Woolfolk, 11.6 points and 5.4 rebounds per game. So, Georgia, they're an interesting team, Katie, right? Like
Hmm.
they do some things that are good, but they do a lot of bad. Like they only score 68.5 points per game. And Katie, they turn the ball over 16.5 times per game. And that's not going to win you a lot of basketball games. But I guess the main point being, Katie, Georgia, even though this one's on the road, and this is Georgia it used to be South Carolina, but Georgia is the team that Kentucky is playing twice a year
Hmm.
this year. So that's definitely much better for Kentucky. But Katie, just I guess in saying all of that, Kentucky should win fairly handily against
Yeah.
Georgia.
Georgia has lost Well, actually, they only lost one in a row. I was gonna say two, but I'm looking at their schedule right now. I was actually wrong. But they play Texas A&M on Thursday, and Texas A&M is actually worse than Georgia. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that kind of turns out. It is at Texas A&M, so it's gonna be interesting. And then you have to think Georgia will be traveling back from Texas to Georgia, which granted, I guess it's not that far, but then they have Saturday to practice, and then they play Kentucky on Sunday. So they don't really have a ton of time to prepare. But I mean, at the end of the day, you lose to Hampton at home, odds are you're probably going to lose to Kentucky at home. It's just, if you look at the stats, if you look at the paper, like that's probably how it's going to turn out. So yeah, I mean, if Kentucky happens to lose to Georgia, hopefully that does not happen. If they
Right.
do, then there's going to be some issue. I know you're going to freak. I'm going to freak. It's going to
Yeah.
be very, very bad. But
But let's
I
let's
don't
not
think.
speak that. Yeah, let's not speak that into existence. That's not going to happen. But I do want to point out Kentucky. They just played at Florida. Of course, not their last game, but the game before. And then fairly recently, Georgia played at Florida as well, but they lost
Mhm.
73-57.
Yeah.
Kentucky won by 16. So I think that
Yeah.
could give you an idea of how this game could go against Georgia. But I guess you never know because, things we like to say around here. Any game in the SEC, especially a road game, is not a given. Katie, I think we're going to wrap it up there. A good episode. There's it's getting interesting now. Like you keep winning games, and you're gonna start making some history. You're gonna start doing things that have never been seen before here at Kentucky. But of course, you can't look too far ahead because you got Georgia coming up, and you got the game after that, and the game after that. You can't think about March until you get there.
Hmm.
But Katie, before we get out of there, do you have anything to say?
No, I mean, I think Kentucky has a really well-deserved break coming up, so hopefully going into Sunday, maybe we'll see some new plays, maybe we'll see some fun stuff. I don't know.
Hopefully, they're a little bit refreshed, a little bit rested. Those starters, man, they're I think literally besides Notre Dame, Kentucky is playing their starters the most. Like it's like 89% starter
Mhm.
like usage rate, which is pretty crazy. But hey, 15-1, 4 in the SEC, it's hard to complain. I'm Phoenix Stevens alongside Katie Hutchison here on episode 12 of the Memorial Memo. Keep chugging along, keep going. We'll have an episode for you this time next week. Thank you all for tuning in. We will see you all next time.